how do I say your name again? Your last name?
Cerins.
Okay, that's how I was gonna
Cerins.
say it. All right.
It means lilac bush from Latvia. My husband's Latvian. It's from
Oh,
Latvia. So
interesting. Okay. Thank you for tuning in to Grieving Voices. Today, my guest is Stephanie Cerins. She is a happiness enhancer. Grief became her constant companion at the age of 15 when she found her hardworking 39-year-old father dying from alcoholism. Stephanie's journey through grief was quite messy at first. She turned to booze and drugs to cope with her grief until she found AA, affirmations, and the ability to talk about her feelings. The affirmations you will read in her books come from her 42-year journey into grief, self love, and her acceptance of the impermanence of life. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your story.
you're welcome. It's my pleasure. I feel blessed to be able to share my message of, you know, we're all going to die, but maybe we don't have to be stuck in all the grief for so long as I was. And so if I could help shorten someone's grief by even a day or a year, or I don't know, I mean, my dad died when I was 15 and I never had a conscious memory of it till I was 29 again after, it was a really stressful time. So
Can you go explain that a little bit more deeply, the conscious awareness of that?
um yeah, well, it was like my subconscious had shut out that I had even had that experience. Like I didn't have a memory of it or anything that I had found my dad until after I went through AA and sobered up. It was just like my brain had blocked that memory because couldn't handle it, I guess. Like we couldn't talk about my father dying. Like me and my mom would just cry. So we just, and they told, my mom's friends, I remember them telling her to take us to counseling, but it was 1980, so people didn't go to counseling then, because then you had something wrong with your brain, and oh my gosh, that's just too humiliating. So, so we just got to muddle through on our own, and then um, when I quit drinking at 24, uh, that really helped me to be able to talk about my feelings and just realize that wow, everybody's a big mess. Like because we all go around just pretending everything's good and how are you today? Oh, fine, I'm doing good. How are you? And all these, just on the surface conversations and so many people had with me, right? That until I went to AA, I didn't know that people, well, so many people are suffering and that a lot of people had it way worse off than me. And that it just helped me put my life in a bit of more perspective that um, like that old Buddhist story, take a cup. If you have a grief, take your cup and fill and ask for some butter to anybody that didn't have any grief, right? And you pretty soon learn that everybody has grief and that ev- everybody has a hard life, and that the sooner we can see that and just come together and support each other, the better life will be. And so that's my goal, is to just try to be supportive to my friends and family and clients, and um, in my reflexology and Reiki and happiness enhancing uh, affair that I'm trying to get everyone to, take the life a little lighter, right? We're all so serious about things and stuff. And so how can we be more gentle and not worry about it so much? Everything.
Well, and share the burden, right? It's
Yeah.
sharing the burden. And I think too, what I've connected in the work that I do with clients and Reiki and grief work and all of that too is that those that have an openness to healing and to their own embracing their own story are much able to connect with others more deeply, and because they've probably connected with themselves in a way that has brought them some lightness, right? And so if we open ourselves to that process, beautiful things really can come from it. And
Mm.
yeah. So what did that look like for you? I mean, because your father he was an alcoholic, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So was that pretty much all of your upbringing? That's all you really knew?
Yeah, he was a functional alcoholic, right? So he went to work and then he drank. But And so, yeah, that was what I saw and experienced, because he was a drunk my whole, he it got worse, but, he was always partying with his friends and playing pool, and everybody had a pool table and a game room, and, you know, that's how we went over to everybody's house and took turns and had drinking parties, right? So, um, all of my parents' friends had a shorter lifespan than their parents, right?
Mm.
Like my mom's dad, I mean, my dad's mom was 74, and my mom's parents were into the 80s and 90s when they went. And my mom had terrible rheumatoid arthritis because she was x-rayed for acne in the 50s. For 6 months, 2 or 3 times a week, they baked my mom under an x-ray machine called a treat master to heal her acne. Like, come on. So anyway, her mom should have just quit making all them sweetie things.
Wow.
So yeah, so it was really, my parents weren't very happy in life. My mom never felt very well. She used to wake up even in her 30s and say, "I feel like Grandma Pitty Poo," right? And so when I grew up, after my dad died and stuff, I just wanted to be happy. It's like we have a house and dirt bikes and horses and stuff, and but nobody has any happiness, right? How do I get happy? And so I just started reading self-help books and um, trying to figure it out on my own, right?
What age was that when you started reading the self-help books?
It was actually before my dad died. My first one, I have my front, this is my favorite one, Working with the Law. And it's about God's law. And I bought a whole bunch of them. So this is one of my last ones that's brand new. But I've probably read this book about 5 times. And in it somewhere it says, you could manage your mind or your mind will manage you. And I thought, well, I want to be the boss of my mind. Well, little did I know how hard that would be some days, right? That, and to just um, take responsibility for my emotions and my thoughts and train my brain what I want it to think instead of just thinking it gets to think whatever it wants.
So, I mean, first of all, I think to have that awareness at 15, right? Like, how do I find happiness? I just, and to have that, it's like all this stuff is around you. I should be happy. Why am I not happy? Right. So,
Right.
like, what, I mean, gosh, if I would have had that awareness at 15, I mean, if only all of us would, right? But what, I mean, I don't even know where to go from here because I just the thought of that, like, I don't even know what I was going to say.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm
I think
sorry.
it's because my family had enough money, right? My mom's parents were quite well off. I mean, not like rich, rich, but my grandpa had his own car lot, and then my grandma invested the money in stocks and all that. And so, I mean, in my grandma's house, the golden rule, literally on a plaque up in the kitchen, the golden rule said, "The one with the gold makes the rules." And my grandma had the gold, and she made the rules, right? And so I think because we had enough money, that wasn't the problem, but it was just no happiness, right? I think my dad didn't like his job, and so that's why he drank. And then all his friends, their wives worked, but he had to be the only worker. And then my mom even needed a housekeeper, even though she didn't even do anything, right? So I mean, my wife, I can't even clean the house and she doesn't even work. And I can only imagine right now that I'm an adult, right? And so, but of course I didn't understand all that then, right? And so, um, so just the grieving, I was like daddy's little girl, and we did everything together and went fishing and had fun. And then when he left, I was like, well, why am I here with mom? Why didn't you take me with you? Oh my gosh, right? And so I was
Mhm.
just so distraught. And it's like, I'm just gonna die. Well, what is the point of this whole thing? You're just gonna die? Like, this is kind of pointless, this life thing, isn't it? And so I really had to find a whole reason to live in everything because I was so confused at 15 that I didn't even, I fantasized lots of times just driving off the road, right? Because I just didn't get what was supposed to happen next, right? And so now what I've kind of learned is all that happened so I can help other people grieve. Like my friend Julie loved my dad, married a man like my dad, and her husband died like almost exactly the same. Like she had 4 kids, but and her oldest one was like 16 or so, and the youngest one was 6 or 7, just like me, really close to me and my brother's age, right? He was 8 years younger than me. And so, um, and now I've been able to help her family through she has a son that's having terrible, terrible times, and through his life, I've gone and down and helped and stuff. Because I just understand the grief that he's going through that, she never took the kids to counseling either when the dad died and all the grief, right? Even though it was 20 years late.
Yeah, I was gonna
So,
thank you for bringing that up again because I did want to circle back to that. Even you said 1980, not much has changed, I think, in a lot of ways. I think with COVID, that's really, I mean, I'm hoping that we don't take 5 steps back, 10 steps back once maybe life seems to feel more settled and secure with COVID moving forward. I hope we
mhm,
don't take steps back in the terms of mental health and addressing that and the needs of kids and everything.
mhm.
But my dad was I was 8 when my dad passed away, and so
Wow.
I grew up with grief too. And so that wasn't emulated obviously for you, like how to grieve, right? Like you didn't know what to do or how to process and things. And it sounds like you didn't have that kind of relationship with your mom either. Is that accurate?
Oh, yeah, yeah, me and my mom were very yeah, if my mom told me to do something, I would do it the opposite way, like, we didn't 'cause there was a 'cause she was jealous. I mean, she was even jealous that I had got boobs, right? Well, I thought, "Well, your dad didn't sit you on the lap and look at Playboys. I sat in my lap with my dad, and while he looked at Playboy magazine, so I knew you had to have boobs if you're gonna be a girl or nobody would like you. So I prayed for boobs when I was 5, mom."
Oh, wow.
You
S-
know? So, um So yeah, there's all, there it's just so interesting growing up and, there's so much we could have been taught in school that, you know, about psychology and self personal growth and stuff that we just leave out of school. I don't know where they think we're going to learn at church or at home or
Well, and that's the thing. I personally feel like it is the responsibility of a parent to guide your children through all of those things. But when you haven't learned it yourself, you're going to resort to what you know, and those patterns and those beliefs are going to be passed down.
yeah,
No doubt about it. So that's
yeah,
why we in grief recovery, we have a program that's helping children with loss. That's prevention. But truthfully, like I look at it like the most important grief that needs to be addressed in a home with children is the grief of the parents. Because if they
yeah,
can learn to process their grief, they will teach their children and guide their children through that process naturally and
yeah.
holistically.
Yes, totally. Yeah. But for so long in our culture, it was just suck it up, buttercup, right? And now we've almost gone the other way that we're exploring emotions ad nauseum sometimes a little too much, I think, right? It's like we have to have balance even with our emotions because if we get too buried in them, just going down the rabbit hole, well, then we're stuck there. We have to find a way to, to have it in the background, but be able to move forward, even though those experiences were hard or whatever, right?
I think of two terms like coping and like you said, like a balance. And it's finding that not balance, what was I trying to think of? Um, regulating, like emotional regulating,
Yes,
for
exactly.
yourself rather than trying to cope, right? And it's learning to regulate yourself. And I think in parenthood, it's challenging anyway. It brings up everything and all your insecurities. It is challenging to regulate your emotions. But again, I think it comes back to addressing your insecurities as a parent. It has ripple effects for the kids.
It totally does.
And so growing up for you, like, you started to read personal development books and started to kind of pave your own path to healing. What did that look like for you? Because I know you said you went to AA and things like that, but what was life like before you got to that point? Because you
Oh,
said you had resorted to drinking. Was that as a teenager too?
oh yeah, I started drink. Yeah, well, as soon as I got at 15 and a half, I was already starting to drive, right? Pretty much after my dad passed away. And I'd already been riding motorcycles and stuff before that. So I knew how to drive, right? And so, um, and then I just started drinking and partying, and I got myself my first boyfriend was 21 when I was 16, so he could buy the booze, right? And so that was very convenient. Um, and then once I graduated school, I just did whatever I wanted, right? My mom would take my car away, and because I was misbehaving, and then I would be good Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'd sleep in. She'd have to give me the car so I could go to school, right? So my poor mom, right? I just did whatever I wanted. And she really, I went from being this angelic child to, listening to AC/DC on the highway to hell, right? So, it was quite shocking for my mom um and my whole family, the transformation that I went through, right? And for even my schoolwork, right? I was almost an A student to just barely graduating, and failing classes and all kinds of stuff, right? And so just because I had so much pain, I didn't understand, and no one was even trying to help me understand, right? I was just having to figure it out on my own. What is this whole point of this life thing? Like, I got to go through all this and I'm just going to die. And it's like, oh my, you're right. It just was really, I was totally in shock, right? Like, because my dad just, he, um, he came home from work, and he had crashed his car, and just right out in front of our house. So when I got up in the morning and looked out the main house window, I could see my dad's car was up the road instead of like put in the garage. And so, not that I could have seen it in the garage, right? I just shouldn't have seen my dad's car. So of course I just go running out there, and then he was laying in the road dying, right? Like, he died on the way to the hospital. And so was coming back too. Like, when I was coming up to my dad, another guy was coming back, and he had already somehow seen my dad, went home, called the ambulance, and then was coming back to check on him or something, right? And then, so I just ran and told my mom. And then and I already knew when my mom came into the driveway of the neighbor's house, I said, "Oh, my dad's dead." I says, "What do you do?" In my own brain, like with your kid brain. And I'm like, "Well, how can you know that?" "No, they're back too early. He's dead." Right. So somehow I knew. Right. And not that that helped any, but and I just remember thinking, well, now we don't have to worry if my dad's coming home anymore, because he's just not going to come home, right? Because my mom would sit at that, looking out that window that I saw the car being wrecked at. When's Jim coming home? Because he worked shift work at a pulp mill, 7 days a day shift, 2 days off, 7 days a swing shift, 2 days off, 7 days a graveyard, 4 days off. So
Wow.
the times he came home was always switching around, right? So
Well, and that's incredibly taxing on the body alone. And so, you
it's
know,
terrible.
did he have a lot of grief himself, do you think? And I know you had mentioned that part of his drinking was possibly due to like just the relationship that he had with your mom, but and we're not to analyze your father's grief here, but I want to connect the dots of how this cyclical pattern repeats. And so what
Right.
was his experience growing up, do you think that
Yeah, I think my dad got a girl pregnant and had to marry her and felt very trapped by his life. And I don't think that he enjoyed his job very much at the pulp mill, even though he did it for 18 years, right? I mean, he made the best of it, and he was a hard worker, and he would go help his friends build their houses or whatever. If you gave him a beer, he would do anything. And, he was jolly and happy and, always the life of the party, right? Um, but under his grief, I think he had a lot, right? I mean, I'm sure his parents weren't emotionally intelligent. I remember his mom being quite strict and harsh, and, Grandma Sorensen only had sex once a week, once a month, whether Grandpa needed it or not. That was the story, right? So I think from a very strict, you know, but I mean, before the pill, yeah, I mean, you don't want to be having sex all the time. You're going to be having babies all the time. Nobody can afford that, right? I mean,
Hmm.
and so I think there's, I think our families have been so traumatized and stuff by wars and everything, and just there wasn't anything about emotional growth, right? It's just like you are how you are, and that's just how you are, and whereas it doesn't have to be like that. You can have emotional growth and you can change your life and you can go, you don't have to be stuck in the same class or system or whatever if you work on yourself, right? Um, and you don't have, and you don't get caught up in all the sadness, right? Because it's how we feel creates our life. So if we feel like bad and sad, then we're just going to create more sadness. We had to, even if I, like in my marriage, my last marriage, my ex-husband used to slap me around. And I would say, oh, well, thank you for that, because I got to learn something, not to be mad at why it happened, right? Because the person who taught me reflexology and where I got that book, Working with the Law, my mom's reflexologist, he let me know that um, you have to be thankful for everything if you want to have a good life, because that's how you stay in the vibe of abundance. By not, that's why it says have faith in the Bible and all that, right? Like, because you don't worry about what's going on in real life, you keep the faith of, and then that's how it turns out good, right? And so that's just um, what I've been trying to dedicate my life to, is just keeping the faith no matter what life looks like now. It always, like, just what it's happening in the world. People are all worried. Well, I'm not worried because it always turns out the best for me. But right, so I'm not going to worry because I'm going to be in the right place at the right time, right? And I think if we could all think that more, then the hard parts are easier. It's not that I don't have hard things to go through or whatever anymore, but it's just that I'm at peace with it and it's okay. I remember when I read The Road Less Traveled, and the first sentence was, life is hard. That made me feel so good. Like, oh, life is hard. Oh, well then, okay, I can do all right. It's not like it was just hard for me. It was just hard, period, right? And so,
Yeah.
to not be so worried about it. I think that's what I learned in AA, that gosh, my parents were pretty good really compared to some of the parents out there. Like, they didn't even feed their kids, right? Like, they beat their kids, right? I didn't get beaten. I had food, right? I had a grandma that took me to the fanciest children's bootery and bought me the best shoes once a year, right? So I had a lot of advantages a lot of people didn't have, even though I still was just a blue collar family.
I resonate in a lot of what you said. And I think there's some people listening that might think that, well, that's really a Pollyanna approach. Like, have you been told that? Like, how I don't worry about anything, nothing is worth worrying over. And worry, I've read too that worry is a prayer you never ask for. Like, it's, or something like that. But some might view that mentality as Pollyanna. But for me, I would always try to find the silver lining, like well, at least this didn't happen, or at least I have this, so it's kind of taking the situation and reframing it. Like, I became a master at reframing because I think I would have succumbed to my own grief had I not learned the power of reframing.
Yes, I think you said it very well. I think that's exactly where I was. I was just so overcome by everything, that because my mom wasn't well, right? So, and we had horses and stuff, and we had board horses that I took care of, and there was a lot, right? Like, my friend Julie told me once, I can't believe how much you had to do. I thought it was so your parents were so mean because you had to do all this stuff. I never thought that. I loved the animals. I loved taking care of them. I wanted to have a farm. I thought I was Laura Ingalls Wilder reincarnated, right?
I love that show. Little House on the Prairie. Yeah, I love that show. And I think just having something to nurture, right? Something else to take care of. And I've heard too, like I've read in grief, and I know that with grief, the fastest way to get out of your own sorrow is to help someone else or something else, like take that love with nowhere to go, right?
Yeah.
And put it into something else, and you put it into your animals. And so have you ever, I mean, I imagine you have, but I'm sure you've reflected on that time, and those animals are probably the blessing in disguise that you had. I was always trying, I didn't live on a farm. We lived in town, and I always wanted to live on a farm, but I was the kid that always brought stray animals home. It's because too, like I had this love with nowhere to go. Like I didn't know what to do with it because in a lot of ways it was rejected in my house and it wasn't emulated for me.
Yeah.
And and I think that's so important to have somewhere for that love to go.
Yeah, no, for sure. I was very lucky to have the horses as my friends and the dogs and whatever, all the animals that I got to tend and stuff. It was very healing for me. I mean, and it even teaches you about life and death. I mean, a friend of ours had some goats. I was going into goat 4-H. I got a couple of goats. Some cat came in, gutted my goats, and they both were dead, right? I mean, you know, there's lots of death on the farm, right? And my dad wanted to raise cows, so we went and got 9 3-day-old baby calves. So then I had 9 baby calves to feed. Well, we didn't know nothing about it, and luckily 4 of them lived somehow. 5 of them died, right? I mean, so I think that was good that I learned that, but it's even though I had experienced, previous deaths of grandparents or different things, that still didn't prepare me for an out of order death when your parent dies so young. Or if you have a child that dies, that's another kind of an out of order death that's like there's not even a word for it, right? They say
Mhm.
when you lose your kid, right? So
So how did your growing up with grief shape your life in adulthood?
I think it helped me um to enjoy my life more, to really understand that I do have an effect of my life because I was able to cope with the grief, right? Like I overcame it and dealt with it, and even if it took years and years, um, and it's helped me to make peace with death. So I think death is my friend now, and I'm not scared of it. And um, I've even been thinking about becoming a death doula or something like that, right? To help people to be able to cope and to help even make funerals, right? Like I reached out to a group that does a grief subscription to help people, and they wanted someone to help write about to people to cheer them up about grief, and they wanted you to have a degree and stuff, and I don't have a degree, but I thought I'd apply anyway, right, and see what happens, and so I might get to write for their paper, right, and so just to be able to reach out in different ways. um I lost my train of thought, and to just to be able to connect and help people understand that we're going to have grief, and to not be so hung up on, I mean, we're all going to die, and to be able to just have a good cry and then be okay, right, and move forward, right, to not just be stuck like I was for so long and irate and just like I can't even believe that my dad died, and oh my god, and that's not right, and just I was just so spinning and spinning and spinning, right, and to be able to come out of that and move forward in my life, um, and to not worry about death anymore. I know I'm gonna die, and I hope it's sometime in the future, but if it's not, oh well. And like, I think it even helps me deal with all this mess of the coronavirus, right, and everything, because it's like I'm not worried about it. I'm gonna be healthy until I'm not, and if I'm not, oh well, then probably there'll be someone to help me because I try to be helpful, right? And I don't, don't worry about things because think it just causes more stress, and then you get more wrinkles. We don't want wrinkles. Then we pay thousands of dollars on creams and stuff. My mom died Oh my gosh, there was so much anti-aging creams and soaps. I gave out swag bags practically. I had all these little baskets of stuff for people to take and remember my mom and, And so when my mom died just a few years ago, it was so easy because my dad had died. It was so traumatic, right? And so even though it was hard and icky, now it's like I can't say it's nothing when people I love die, but it's certainly the worst one I'm sure happened already, right? Because it was so traumatic for me.
Well, and because the relationship was different, right?
Yes.
I mean, every loss is going to be different because the relationship is unique.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. I didn't think of it like that before, but yeah, for sure.
So how did, people will say too, or I don't know, they say, I don't know who they is, but you tend to marry your parent, you tend to look for someone or marry someone like your parent. Did you find yourself as an adult, like attracting someone like your father to you? Or had you come so far in your healing that it was very different of it? It was a different experience.
Yeah, no, I didn't really marry people like my dad so much. I didn't marry any womanizing men, but I think that, but I married my other own kind of weirdness men, right? And because this is my third marriage, and this marriage is I'm coming into the 18th year, so I think we're doing pretty good. and but yeah, my other marriages were very I just felt so alone and lonesome, and I couldn't stand to be alone, and um, I just wanted anybody to like me, right? And then as I aged and progressed, it was like, no. I mean, I remember sitting at a wine bar and one lady was like, "As I get older, I get less pickier." And I thought, as I get older, I'm way more pickier. It's like I'd rather be alone than put up with what, I've put up with sometimes, right? So it's just more I think it's been um, just helpful to be able to really listen to what I want. And like I was committed to not having children. Like I didn't want kids. And when I turned to menopause a few years ago, I was like, shit, I did it. I didn't have any kids. I kept that word to myself, right? Um and that meant a lot to me that I did that. And so because I felt like I needed to re-raise myself, right?
Mhm.
And how could I trust some guy to be there the whole time, right? And um, my ex-husband didn't want to have children. My first husband wanted to have children, but I was just like, you tell me you have two children and I haven't met them, so I think you're not really dad material. I thought, right? And so my first husband was a partier and a drunk, and so he was maybe, but not, but he wasn't hardworking or anything good like that. So
But the quality of looking for alcohol to soothe the self is was similar
oh,
to your father then.
oh yeah, it was terrible, well, especially for me too. I've even thought, now if my dad was killed by alcohol, right, and his proclivity to drink, and I had always thought, well, what if an assassin had killed my dad? I wouldn't have dated the assassin, but I did sort of date, right? Like, because I drank so much. Like, I was in AA when I was 24. I got a DUI when I was 21. Um, so I drank and drove all the time. Drive blackout, right? Get home, don't know how, right? Lots of times. But I would tell my dad when I was drunk, he's dead, right? You had to get me home, right? Right. And I guess he did, because here I am still, right? When a lot of times when, I was probably, I don't know how I got there. So
So how old were you with that first marriage?
I got married the first time 21.
So
And
very on it, like very new in your grief yet. Like that's not very far out from your grief, and you hadn't addressed it by then, really, have you? Had you?
oh no, no.
Yeah.
I didn't even start address, even when I went to AA, I wasn't really starting to address my grief till I was in my second marriage. My ex-husband really helped me. He had worked on himself a lot, and I learned more about self-help books and even more salesmanship books and just personal growth so many different kinds, right? That's when I really started reading. And I worked at a private college, and so I cleaned the bookstore. So I was open to a lot of college psychology books and different books that I could buy. Just you don't the bookstore will sell you a college book even if you're not in the college, right? And so I bought a lot of books that helped me to understand grief and grieving and personal development and all that stuff.
To understand yourself,
Yeah, to
really, too.
understand myself. Yeah, exactly. Because I didn't have any understanding of why was I so upset and everything else. My foot's asleep. I'll put the other one asleep now. And so, uh, yeah, it just the grieving that I had that was so hard, I feel very relieved that I did it and that, you know, that
And
it
then you
helped me and hopefully I could help others, right? That's what I learned in AA too. No matter how big of a mess you are, you could still help someone. We're all here to help.
you had mentioned that your second husband was abusive in some ways.
Yeah.
And so if he was working on himself, was it, I mean, his journey was his journey, but obviously that was more grief for you.
I guess. Um, when I met my husband, I never had a climax in sex, and so I had been trying to find a man to help me with that, and he helped me with that, and that was such a relief that I thought maybe I could help him to stop hitting people too, right? By loving him enough and giving him what I thought he needed, right? But all I learned in that relationship is people are just going to be who they are, and I'm not in the people fixing business anymore. And by the end of it, I just told God, geez, I'm not a very good person, because by the end of that marriage, I wanted to kill him back. Like, I could remember laying there, like fantasizing, imagining, or whatever you want to call it, ending him because he had hit me so many times, right? Or slapped me or whatever. And that to just, that I didn't have to fix him, and that it's his that it wasn't me, that he would hit anybody, that and so that helped me to forgive him and to be able to move on, because I realized by me staying there, he couldn't control himself. And so then I was actually harming him by continuing to stay there. And so that's how I was finally able to leave, because he had so much grief and there was so much. Someone put him in the dryer and turned it on when he was a kid. Can you
Oh
imagine?
my,
Like, he was so abused. His family had so much physical abuse, right? And so everybody hit everybody. And his brothers and sisters were really messed up. Like, his sister moved into an apartment. She lived there 2 years. She hadn't unpacked a box. There was boxes stacked everywhere in the house. Like, there's just rampant dysfunctionality, right? And so we just were dysfunctional together, and we helped each other as much as we could. And then when I realized, oh, this isn't working for me, I just left and I went to a battered women's shelter and started over. And just I even gave him the car and everything. I wanted him to just go away, right? And so he left, and it was my car. And I knew that I would get a new car, and I did. I got another old beater, and it didn't cost very much, and it worked okay. And just keep on moving forward and don't get stuck if something bad happens, right? Or if you make a mistake, oh well, just undo it, right? So I left and started over, and my first this is my first book was Healing My Heart After Domestic Abuse, and just affirmations. And then my next one that just came I did in November last year. It's the same principles, just affirmations, and just to try to help women or men, whoever, to be able to get out of their grief and their abuse, and to realize how important our thoughts really are, and what we think and what we feel. And it's not just like feeling sorry for yourself or worrying or being upset. It's just that's really is the problem, is that we can't quit obsessively thinking about what happened, because it's just what happened. It's not And if we don't have to get hung up on it, then we can move through life better and it's easier. Because I was hung up on my dad's death from 15 to 29. I mean, I blocked it out and I didn't think, couldn't remember it. And that's how messed up I was from it. And then when I could remember it, then I could start healing and it's coming out of my cells and just, have dreams about it again and let it release from myself and move forward
I
and like
just
make friends with it, the
I
whole
just
process.
I just want to highlight one thing you said because I've never heard a reframing of that sort when someone has abused you and you reconciled it in your mind in the way that I'm not helping him by staying here. I'm not helping him grow by staying here. And
Yes.
to that is so hard. Like to take in grief recovery, we say take 1% responsibility. And that's why the process of grief recovery can be so difficult for people who are abused. I was molested as a child also. And so that was a really difficult part. That's why forgiveness is so hard for people. But forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. But I think a part
Yes.
of that is just what you said. It's just taking just a sliver of responsibility of your ownership in that relationship because it is a relationship. And it's, a dance with grief when two dysfunctional people bring their all their baggage and they just dump their luggage and it's all just meshed together, right? That's how relationships often start. And
Yeah.
you attracts like, right? And so I do want to get to where that changed for you because the relationship, obviously, once you started to let that grief come out, you attracted someone who has now been your partner for 18 years. And so what did that look like? What helped you? I mean, I know you did AA, but what helped you progress and evolve your grief?
I think when after my dad died, I was just so scared of being alone, right? That I would do anything to not be alone, have roommates, whatever, right? To never live alone, never be alone. And then, um, like my ex-husband, we did everything together. We cleaned houses together. We rode motorcycles together. You know, he even came into the public bathroom with me eventually, like because I was so scared to be alone and make my own choices. I picked controlling people to make my choices for me. Then I don't have to be responsible and whatever happens, well, whatever happens, right? And so then when during that marriage with Jeffrey, he was a salesman, right? And he sold me for years, I say, right? And so, but I learned, I he helped me understand psychology and people. And so really I got over my fear of being alone during that time. And I just felt more confident around people. And just by reading all those self-help books and in that marriage that, everybody's a mess and that life is hard and that, you don't everybody's scared in the whole world. And so by realizing that I'm not the only scared one, if someone lashes out or does something that makes me uncomfortable, I really kind of know now it's really coming from them. I'm triggering something inside of them, like someone triggers something inside of me, and I get upset sometimes too, right? I try not to, but on occasion I still have a screaming Mimi fit. I try not to, but we're all only human. And if we can be more gentle with each other and not take it, someone has a meltdown and then the other person takes it so serious that they get their feelings hurt and then they lash out to the next person. And if we can just stop that repeating lashing out and realize, oh, that person just insulted me because they're hurting. I mean, at 7-Eleven, they show you a video where a guy and his wife have a fight in the car, and the guy comes in the store and he's so rude to you as a checker, right? To show you to not be triggered, right? That, oh, this guy's not mad at you. And really that helped me in life too, that little psychological movie to have that, wow, it's really, you know, my dad was really frustrated in his life, so that's why he held me down and tickled me and did things to me that made me uncomfortable because he was uncomfortable. So if I could deal with my own uncomfortableness and not pass it on to someone, then that makes me feel like I'm helping, and that part of what I've lived through is helping that I'm not, dumping my poop downstream, right? I dealt with it myself with me and God and talked it out with friends that are trustworthy, and because we learned to share. I mean, that's what's been so hard about this COVID. We've been so separated from everyone. And we need to be able to talk and communicate and connect, because that's how we realize, oh, I'm not such a mess. You have problems too, right? But in our society, I think we don't want to talk about that. I mean, we are all, everybody's just puts on what is cool going on in their lives and talks about that. Meanwhile, they just got kicked in the head last night like I did, but they didn't tell and I didn't tell, right? And if we can just realize that everybody's going through stuff, and to try, and if they do something to us, oh, well, maybe, someone was mean to them and it didn't have nothing to do with me, because our parents are broken when they have us, because we're, and then that's why I didn't make any kids, because I didn't want to break anybody, right? I
Mm.
thought I could always adopt if I needed some. There's plenty of people around. And
Is
just
that you talked about death and how you're not afraid of that, and you've made peace with that. Is that
mhm.
something you've thought about, going to the end of your life? And well, I mean, if you've made peace with being alone too, right? Like, so it's not, you're not seeking relationships for codependency reasons, right? You're seeking relationships to enrich your life. But I'm wondering if that decision to not have children, is that something that you think about as you're getting older now?
No, I'm really glad. Especially with this COVID going on. I No, I'm glad. I think there's Yeah, no, I'm so glad that I didn't have kids. I'm just gonna make friends, and, if I don't worry about, like, even some of my people that have kids, "Oh, well, I wonder which kid's gonna take care of me when I get old." Like, I don't even think about that, because I just it's just karma. If you do good, you're gonna get good. So I don't worry about something bad happening. Sure, something bad's gonna happen. The car will break, somebody will die, I don't know. The government's gonna collapse. Who knows what's going to happen? I've been thinking that recently. I thought, when I incarnated here, nobody promised me sane governments, right? It's like, nobody promised me sane partners, right? And so I think we just expect a lot in life. And
Mm.
we see so much richness on TV and plenty, and that it's just ridiculous. I mean, I heard in Cuba, because they don't have TV and all this stuff, that they don't have as much body shaming issues, right? Well, hallelujah, that'd be great if we didn't have, you know, women injecting silicones in their butts or something to make it bigger. I mean, I can't even, it's like, so, you know, I think it's just really important to just stay focused on really what's important. Do we have enough food? Do we have a house to live in? Do we have some friends? You know, Not, am I going to be the richest person on the planet? Am I going to be the next Bill Gates or whatever? Right. And I wish I'm hoping somehow this COVID's going to bring us down to a little more reality of really what, 200 years ago, nobody traveled. Nobody went anywhere, you know.
I know, and isn't it crazy to think of how far all the advancements and all of the stuff in 100 years, just in the last 100 years, even 75, 50 years, it's just absolutely crazy. It's like we're the most spoiled. We're the most spoiled generation, but we're probably in a lot of ways the most miserable. And it comes back to like what you said. It's like you can have all this stuff, but what is enriching your life? Experiences, deep
Yeah.
conversation, deep
Yeah.
connection, and we can't experience that if we don't address the stuff that's like lurking in us.
Exactly. And I, at least nowadays we have enough time to explore some of it. I think before, life was so hard that you just, I can't even imagine having 6 kids, and women had no rights. You had as much rights as the dog, right? I mean, really, just not that long ago, right? And so it's just, um, being grateful for everything's really saved me. I swear, that little piece of advice. Just, if even if you, I'm grateful that I'm late, because if I was any earlier, maybe I would have got in a terrible car crash. Right? I mean, I'm really good at make up good stories instead of bad stories. We need to have a running, oh, it's gonna work out terrible and everything's gonna be bad. No, it's always gonna work out the best for me. I have environmental illnesses, so I have a mask from for bicycle riding from Europe that sometimes I wanted to wear because I'm car exhaust and stuff. I burp and I don't feel good. And my husband's an artist, and we do outside shows sometimes where there's more traffic than my body's comfortable with. So, or like at the end, and I'd put my mask on because there's so much cars going by, and the exhaust just from the cars will make me burp. And then so now the whole world's wearing a mask, so I can wear my mask more. See, it always works out all the best for me. Like, and I make up silly, ridiculous stories like that because it's no more ridiculous than saying, "Oh my God, nothing's going to work, and I'm not going to have any money, and oh my God, and nobody's going to love me, and I'm going to be alone forever." Right? Like, it's just a story. So just make up a better story, right? Abraham Hicks, she's like, just pick the next better feeling thought. And what if you're depression, then rage is better than depression. Well, how great is that to hear? Oh, hooray. If I'm upset, that, right?
Well, and rage can be a very good motivator too. Anger is a
Yes,
very good motivator.
it is. The house gets very clean if I'm angry. That's for sure.
Yes, I am the same way. Ragey mom, clean house.
And so,
You got to channel it, right? Right. Might as well channel it and pour it out and get rid of it and do something productive with it, right?
chopping wood uses a lot of rage, right?
Yeah. No, I love that. I find myself the same thing, like making up stories. If someone like the checkout person, if they're rude to me or whatever, I'm pretty good at making up stories, you know. One
For
second.
sure.
I thought I had my laptop plugged in here, but I guess I didn't. All right. Well, you gave a little piece of advice there about gratitude, but is there anything else that you would share with someone today who may be kind of where you were that in between, where you're just kind of on the cusp of this awareness of how much better life could be and how much sweeter life could be?
I think it's just be gentle with yourself while you're going through anything, and to not to we're so dramatic. Oh, right, like I'm gonna die, or like me wanting to die as at a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, because I'm so enraged that my dad left me here, right? And I missed out on all kind of fun and trauma and life, and understanding. And so to just, you know, be to be patient with yourself and to be gentle with yourself, and to don't expect ourselves to know so much. I mean, it's not like, you don't get a course in life when you're born. It's like we learn to talk, but we can't read. That's kind of how life is, right? You don't you just get thrown into things, right? Like, you don't have to have a training class to have a baby, right? You could just get pregnant when you're 12 or whatever. You have a period and you get pregnant. It's like, huh? How'd that happen? I mean, I'm sure that's what my dad was like. How'd I get a baby? You're kidding me. That's how it happened. Like, really? I don't, he was pretty oblivious, my dad, to it all, right? Like, And I think that's how lots of people go through life. It's just they didn't make choices, it just happened to them, right? And so I think by me choosing that I didn't want to have kids, that started a whole bunch of changes. Because and whatever we decide in life, one of my friends, she wanted to have 6 kids. I was like, wow, okay, and she did it, and I was like, wow, all right. And then she's dealing with that, what she's created, right? And that was a hard one.
Yeah, I just
But
had with teenagers too. I have 3 teenagers, and talking to them about choices and how choices, every single choice that you make has a consequence.
and every thought you think has a consequence, and we're not told that in school, right? We're not right. It's really what we think creates our actions and our beliefs, and that's your life, right? And so just how can we help each other to be more gentle and just really, it's I could have a boyfriend. My dad died. It's like, oh, well, that's one thing to be grateful about. I could have a boyfriend because he would have killed any boyfriend that came around, right? And he would be so mean. I would have never got a boyfriend. That's what I remember thinking. That well, at least I could get a boyfriend now.
Let me ask you this, because it kind of circles back to the whole idea that, your thoughts are important and have consequences, and thoughts become things. And so, what about this idea of life is hard? I want to challenge you on that, because isn't that a belief that life is hard, or is it that we make it hard?
Well, I think for me, the day that I read that and how it resonated is that I sort of looked at like how I thought was everybody else was having an easy time and it was just hard for me. But when I read that, and that helped me have an understanding that, oh, life's just hard sometimes. Not that, but that's, and I do think that sometimes life is hard. I mean, to get up every day and chop wood and carry water. And I mean, could you imagine growing food and then the locusts come and like you didn't have a grocery store with everything just right up the street? Like, we're really, I mean, it's pretty easy for us, really, a lot of us. We don't have a lot of hardships. And in that our past families have had to do. Like if you didn't grow the garden, really, you didn't eat, and that kind of thing. And or you got to go kill the animal and tan the hide, and so you could wear something, right?
And that was on top of the grief they already had too, right? So, a lot of those conveniences of life take away a lot of the grief that will never, hopefully, God willing, that we never experience, right? Or that we never feel personally.
Yes, we have a lot of comforts, and then I sometimes it's when you have a hard thing, sometimes you learn something, but it's still balance, and you still got to have a support system. And I sometimes wonder if with all the because I don't have to have someone with me, right? Our independence makes us more sort of ornery and individual, right? If I don't have to grow the garden and do this and the chickens and kill something and and sit around having a sewing circle so we can make a quilt and faster than 25 years, we'll all work on a quilt and then we'll make one and we'll make one for you and we all make a quilt, right? And that's how we used to do things all together more, right? But with the advent of petroleum does so much work that we don't have to do, right? It digs the holes, it does lots of things and makes our life easier. And then the food, right? That's hard because people are eating such crappy food, they don't even have no energy, right? I mean, 200 years ago, guys cut down trees as big as my house with a saw, with one guy on each end, right? Now we got to have a bigger truck because the guy can't even lift the garbage can, right? I mean, it's so.
You bring up
In,
so many interesting perspectives and thoughts, and it really does it just really brings up for me that we used to do so much more with community.
we
Like
did.
it was, everything was done because you couldn't. I think it's really what it comes down to is that life was done with others, used to be done with others. And
Yeah.
so much, and I think that's what the advancements perhaps have been a contributing factor to this isolation that we experience. Because even if they didn't talk about grief, or it wasn't something that, but you know what, honestly, like when someone died back then, way back then, they would they would have their loved one with them for days and take pictures after they died with them. So everything, grief was even done differently back
Yes.
then. And so I think that
Yeah.
with advancements, the advancements have brought consequences, right? And I think it's this, like you said, this more isolating society. Yeah,
Yeah,
in a
I
lot of
think
ways.
we're separated from death more. They come and hurry up and take away the body and hurry out and off, instead of, you used to wash the body yourself and then bury it
Mhm,
in the backyard, right? Or whatever.
mhm.
And so with the distances and all the modernization, and that we don't even kill animals to eat anymore. Some guy does it in the slaughterhouse and has to kill all the animals for everybody, instead of everybody just getting a little death on you, right?
That's true. That's very true.
And so I think that we've have a sterilization of our life more because of the modernization and the withdrawing of the from people and grief and everything, right? And we think it's supposed to be so easy. But no, gosh, everybody's hungry. I'm trying to grow a garden here. And you plant a seed and you got this little baby embryonic plant, right? Like it's in the womb, right? It's a little baby plant, just one shoot. Everybody eats that little shoot, like to defend that little shoot so you could grow it and eat it, like, right? And and so I feel very lucky to be able to understand the circle of life a little bit more, and if I can help someone else understand it more, that because I don't think we die. When I did a meditation when my mom, I had said if she wanted a Reiki healing when she was getting ready to go, and she said she did, and I was very shocked. And so I went down to a beach by where we lived, and just did a little meditation. And in that meditation, first me and my mom, I saw her, we saw her body in the bed of the hospital bed, right? And we were just kind of like, I guess hovering in the air. I couldn't see us, but we were like a drone view of the bed, the hospital bed, an overview. And she was like a big giant raisin. I was like, oh, mom, I think your body's getting all tired and wizzled up. That's not looking too good, is it? No, it's not looking too good, is it? And then the next thing in my meditation, we went and we were walking up a path, and it was very glowy at the end of the path. And as we got closer to the light, the glowing mass, it individualized more. And it was like there was grandpa, and there, not a vision, but the feeling, right? There was dad and grandpa and Gordy and Ellen and all these people waiting for my mom, right? And then I took my mom's hand and passed it, what it felt like, to my dad. And so after that visualization, I'm not scared of death like at all. It's just, we're just light beings and we got these bodies and we just go back to the big ball of light.
So
And that,
I'm
and there's going to be people there waiting, and we're never alone.
so would you say that's what grief has taught you?
Yep, that we're never alone. Yeah, if you ask and you shall receive, it's really true. If you just ask and you don't, and expect it to happen, but don't put a time limit on it and don't worry about it, right? But then just trust and do your best, because we're all just here for helping and to be compassionate with one another if we can.
So you mentioned Reiki. You are a Reiki practitioner, Reiki master?
Yeah, I do Reiki and reflexology simultaneously on a person. So I do the energy body and the physical body. And most of the time my clients are falling asleep on the table, and I don't understand that messing around their head. And I'm like, I don't know if I would be that. but I feel grateful that um to be, and then I write affirmations, personalized affirmations for people to help them. Um, just like a little short story, right? That's something good, because I have friends that just ad nauseum berate themselves, right? And so can't we ad nauseum cheer ourselves up and say, "Oh, I did something good. I did the dishes today. I didn't even have to cuss or nothing while I did it," or, you know.
So all of the healing that you've kind of experienced in the last 15, 18, 20 years or so,
Uh-huh.
that has led to you, like, would you say that Reiki found you? Because that's most Reiki practitioners I know say that Reiki found them.
Well, it was, yeah, I used to just, when I've done reflexology since I was a teenager, because I learned it to help my mom, the from the reflexologist that she used to take us to, and he trained me to help my mom because she was such a mess. And then, um, so, but when my ex-husband, he used to have migraines, so I would sit and do the reflexology, but before I even knew Reiki, I visualized having light come in my head and go out my hands, God's light, God's love, whatever, good orderly direction. Um, and I would say, I don't know why Jeffrey has a headache, but you know why Jeffrey has a headache, God, whatever, good orderly direction. And Jeffrey's body knows why Jeffrey has a headache. So maybe I could just like give him some energy and you guys could figure it out, right? And not take responsibility or anything for the energy. And then I read a Reiki book and I thought, I've been doing Reiki already. So then I got a Reiki, I became a Reiki master so I could actually learn what I was trying to do more. That's how I felt. So yeah, I think Reiki definitely found, it's just like a mom. When your mom like kisses your boo-boo, that's Reiki, right? It's just like offering good, loving energy from your heart, right? But if you learn how to do it, well, then you can do it better.
It seems like to me, you've kind of found the essence of who you are with your healing, right? You've come back to the essence of who you are, what you were doing with the animals and caring for the animals and helping them transition when it was their time, and doing that for those that you loved along the way, right? Like that's really the essence. It's, and I think in grief and when we're so far in it and deep in it, we can't connect to that part of ourselves. It's really difficult to.
No, yeah, because we're so overcome with the emotions and we're feeling so alone in everything. And because we've decided, oh, that person left and they did it. I mean, I thought, my dad died because of me and I felt guilty for it. But it didn't have anything to do with me. It had to do with all the thoughts he thought and the overwhelm in his mind that he felt too alone and he felt overwhelmed or whatever it was that caused him to pick up a bottle every day, right? And besides working at a very toxic place where they have you wash your car when you leave, but you didn't hose the shit out of your lungs, and
Wow.
off your skin, and working at a pulp mill was not very healthy, right? And meanwhile, I know lots of guys that lived and retired, and I even cleaned house for a guy that was over 80 years old who worked at a pulp mill forever. So it didn't have to kill you either, the chemicals, right? It's just how you perceive things and think. And
Right. So what, is there anything else that you would like to share?
no, I just feel very blessed to be a part of your podcast and to have a chance to share my story and maybe cheer up a person and help them find that their beauty in their own self and to not be affected so much by the fears and the angers of their families and whoever raised them and taught them the world how it should be.
Pave your own path, right?
Yeah, yeah, to don't worry about what other people think and make up your own silly story and just do it. I'm the happiness enhancer, right? I just made that shit up. But I did but last year I did take I love Heart Math, the company Heart Math. And so I'm a Heart Math certified Heart Math mentor to help me be able to help people get in touch with their heart and to actually breathe emotions through their heart, right? And to be able to maintain heart coherence more often.
Oh, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Oh, sure. I love heart math because heart math is the study that um, that our heart really is more powerful than our brain. Because in our society, we're told our brain's more powerful than our heart.
Mm.
When in the meantime, what's the first thing that forms in a human body in the womb? The heart. When does it start beating? At 18 to 21 days. Do we have a brain? No, we don't even have a brain, right? When our heart starts beating, right? And that we have a brain, actually, there's brain neurons in our heart. And there's brain neurons in your stomach. You have the same kind of neurons in your brain, in your heart, and your stomach to help us to be able to um, connect with each other. I mean, we have a mirror neurons in our brain so that if someone's crying, we feel empathy because that person needs us to feel empathy, right? And so that we can connect. And that they've proven now that there's an aura, like they can measure this auric field that that goes about, isn't it interesting, about 6 feet. Most people's heart energy goes about 6 feet, and then I'm finding that we're supposed to distance 6 feet. So I thought that was interesting. And that just um, I love heart math because it proves that heart's more important than brain. And I think that that's true. And I think in our society that's totally not emphasized at all.
I would 100% agree with you. And I'm very curious about that. And so I will definitely be looking into that.
Yeah, it's
Um,
heartmath.org or heartmath.com. And the .org has all the scientific studies and stuff, and you can go down the wells. And the .com is um, a little bit more them reaching out and promoting themselves and stuff like that. But it's been going for about, I don't know, 20 or 30 years, Heart Math. And then um, oh, if you haven't, oh, you're gonna love Heart Math if you haven't heard of it. Oh my
no,
God.
I've never heard of it.
And so I paid $1,400 so I could become a mentor, and that allows me to be able to train about 10 people. But I think I'm gonna go for the, I don't know when, but I'll go and get the next one so I could do like 100 people, and then I could have as many. But not that it really matters that I could really get that many people together right now anyway, still. So, but yeah, just to yeah, heart math is so fascinating, and it really helps to, and it's hard, like to actually generate a feel like you got a thing you stick on your ear and it measures like your heart coherence. And it's not that easy to keep the feeling of love going, not thinking about love, but to actually emanate a feeling and to get that heart. There's a, it can turn red or green or blue, and to keep it green, which means you're all like this, you know, a monk, I would say, or whatever, right?
Mhm.
And and so it's fascinating to, I can generate it real good for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then it seems like it starts dropping off. And so I haven't worked with it as much as I could, but I would like to someday be able to generate that for 20 minutes or a half an hour, or just constant if it would stay green. But I can get it to go totally green for like 10 or 15 minutes, and then your mind starts to wander, and you get to think about the laundry or something.
But I think that really it makes me think of gratitude, right? Like gratitude and, loving what is good in your life and giving that appreciation is kind of up there with love.
Well,
So
the more we can, the more you can just focus on whatever we can do. Not everything that we can't take anything. I can't do nothing about what the governments do, nothing about what anybody does except me. And
yep,
what can I do? Well, I could at least try to, at least I could be generous and kind no matter what anybody else does. And then I know someone's generous and kind, and then I'll run into them eventually.
I love that. So where can people find you? I know you've written a couple books.
My one book, Healing My Heart After a Loss, is on Amazon, and I hope to get my other one on Amazon pretty soon because I published it through a different way the first time in 2017, and so I just have to redo it in Word, and so it's taken a little while. And but anyway, so on Amazon, and then Healing My Heart After a Loss just comes up if you type it in the search bar. And then and I'd like to send you a book I'd like to email you a book I'd like to mail you a hard copy if you want to email me your address. Because I feel blessed that to have this opportunity to share my story and cheer up the planet. Because that's my goal, to bring cheer to the planet, or cheer up the people of planet Earth, or because we all just take it too serious. And happiness is healthy. That's my website. And I have a blog that I've been writing. It'll be my 10-year anniversary. I just thought of now when we were talking that my blog's 10 years old this year. And I've written
Congratulations.
affirmations. When I first started it in 2012, I was writing affirmations every day, just like a paragraph long affirmation to try to cheer people up. Because and that's why I made this a coloring book. Like you read in color, because then if you just read this once, that's not going to change your life. But because you have to read something over and over. There's a book called The Greatest Salesman, and it says in there, Og Mandino tells you to read it in the morning, read it in the afternoon, and then read it out loud. Each chapter, you read the little chapter, 2 or 3 pages, in the morning, the afternoon, and then out loud at night. And you do it for a whole month. And then, so it takes 10 months to get through that book if you really do what it says. But it's really like, one of the things is I laugh at myself, and the world laughs with me, and I take myself, and I don't make a big deal of things, and just and obviously it was a long time ago. I can't even remember all 10 of them anymore, right? But I will laugh at myself. I live this day as if it is my last. Just lots of things so that you don't waste your life. You take the moments that you get,
I love that.
right?
Well, I will put all of the links to everything you mentioned in the show notes. And
Thank you.
I thank you so much for this rich conversation and for you sharing your story with my listeners today.
I feel very blessed, and thanks for having me. You're lovely, and I like you as much as your voice. I thought she has a good voice, so I'm going to reach out to her. So,
I love that. Thank you so much. And remember, when you unleash your heart, you unleash your life. Much love.
all right.